Well, it's day 4, and I apologise if I sound like a cross between Rod Stewart and Lee Marvin, but I've had a chest infection for the last couple of days, and I couldn't speak yesterday without spluttering and coughing, and poor Anna Maria is down with the same thing and got pretty inflamed tonsils to the point that she can't even speak today. So hopefully things will be better tomorrow. But we have had a fantastic couple of days. It's now day 4. We're some 270 kilometres southwest of Riyadh, moving towards Jeddah steadily. And Reem and I have been walking through some extraordinary landscape of granite outcrops and sandy valley beds, which wouldn't look out of place were they in Namibia. If I were to see a photograph, I would say Namibia, not Arabia. We're getting higher and higher in terms of altitude. Last night's camp was at 3,300 feet, and temperatures are progressively dropping. The wind swung to the north, and with the increased altitude, it was down to 4 degrees yesterday morning and 3 degrees this morning, which, when you're used to the 30s and 40s, it's bitterly cold. But however, no sympathy from our producers in Ullapool and Inverness, Dan and Penny at Adventurous Audio, who sent me a picture of a foot of snow this morning, and -3, who told us to man up. So we're doing our best, and hopefully with a good rest tonight, we will be back and firing on all cylinders tomorrow. But it's been a fantastic few days. We've been trudging across sand dunes, we've gone through sandstone, mica schist. We're now in this extraordinary granite country, amazing peaks that Philby was able to put a name to, and if he couldn't put a name to it, he would describe the shape. So it's been easy for us to be able to follow in his footsteps. And I think we've grown more and more in admiration of the man. His spatial awareness of what was around him was extraordinary, because like us, he's just walking in a straight line and meandering between obstacles, but pretty much a narrow line, and yet he was so aware of what lay to the north and south, and what wadi might connect with another wadi, and so he was able to suggest connections of drainage systems and mountains, which must have made the cartographers at the Royal Geographical Society in London so look forward to his arrival when he would come home, because they would be able to add that incredible detail to the maps of Central Arabia. So the Royal Geographical Society was Philby's second home for sure, and we were delighted yesterday to hear that Reem has been invited to speak on February the 8th, 2023 at an evening all about women explorers in Arabia. Bit of an exhibition which can run for a few weeks, but then Reem will be on stage, and I can't think of anyone better to talk about modern explorers in Arabia, and female explorers at that. So we're 3,300 feet, 270 kilometres southwest. I think what yesterday and this morning threw home to me was the importance of aspect when choosing a campsite, and the difference being that this morning we awoke to a sun-washed campsite, which was lovely and warm, relatively, and the day before it was just bitterly cold, and we were in shadow, partly because of small mountains, partly because of a few clouds. But that importance of aspect when you're choosing your campsite on an expedition in Arabia in the winter was driven home to me. And I recall the longest expedition I ever did was for an entire year on Svalbard, the Arctic archipelago, 500 miles off the north coast of Norway, and we sailed up in August and we didn't come back until the following July, and 3 months of total darkness. And I do recall when we got to about February, late February, early March, that there was a faint glow on the southern horizon as the sun crept higher at noon every day. It didn't quite break the horizon, but the glow was definitely getting stronger. So John and I would walk up the small peak above our base camp called Grunsteinfjella, the Green Stone Mountain, and we would stand there and watch the glow and just hope to be there when the sun did break that horizon, which it did. And I remember really choking back the tears on that day. It was only there briefly, not less than a minute, I would say, before it was gone again. But I knew then that spring was on its way, and every day a couple of minutes more before, early April, 24-hour daylight, and that was how we lived for the summer. But I was quite proud of the fact that we'd chosen a good place, what I thought was a good place to overwinter and see out the worst of the storms. but actually in hindsight it was not the best place. And from the top of Grunsteinfjella, I would look down at our base camp and it was in shadow from the mountains, and it would remain in shadow until March, April, I seem to recall. And yet when I looked to the east, I could see Fredheim, an old trapper's hut on the south shore of Templefjord, and as soon as the sun appeared on the southern horizon, it shone up the Sassendalen Valley and it lit the walls, it warmed the walls of this wooden hut. So the trappers were much more in tune with their environment than we visitors were. It's just something for us that we need to be aware of, because we're all struggling with the cold a little bit here today and yesterday. Hopefully things will get better. But we are walking across what Philby described as the highlands of Najd, this area of Saudi Arabia where Philby wasn't entirely sure that Ibn Saud had the allegiance of the tribes, and his purpose for doing this journey was to prove to Ibn Saud that he did. So he was travelling under the protection of Ibn Saud's men, but even so, at this stage they had to be cautious. And in his book Arabian Sands, he says, "We were now on the fringe of the Ataba marches. Hitherto, from the coast westwards, it had never been necessary to take precautions either to conceal our presence or to guard our camps. Now it was different. We had turned aside from the road to be out of the way of chance passengers. We had camped in a hollow to conceal our campfire. Among us were 4 men of the Ataba tribe who now assumed responsibility for our safety, and at intervals they went forth to the surrounding sand hummocks and proclaimed to the world that we were travelling under the protection and were men of Ibn Saud." When Philby refers to a road, this was 1917, and it's not a tarmac road. It was the pilgrim road from Riyadh to Mecca, along which all of the pilgrims would go performing the Hajj, go and come back. So it was a very well-trodden path. That's what Philby referred to as a road. It was marked with cairns on some of the small hummocks that we walk past. We can see cairns that are to guide people across the landscape. But also what guided Philby was fireplaces, because obviously if you're travelling in the depths of winter like we are, trying to stay warm at night, so lots of fireplaces, people to cook whatever they're able to catch. And there was lots of wildlife here then, herds of gazelle and bustard and things like that, but very little today. Plenty of bird life for the ornithologists. We've got the redstarts and wheatears and shrikes, the butcher birds which impale their prey on the acacia thorns. So there's plenty of wildlife around. There's plentiful eagles today. Almost every rock has an eagle perched on top of it, which is lovely to see. Not much evidence yet, despite all the rain, of the desert greening up, which is something that we associate with heavy rain. Often the desert turns green quite quickly, but the problem here is that it's actually so cold still that they won't germinate. The little seeds won't germinate. We saw some pictures last night that people sent us from Mecca, where we're heading towards. We should be there in about 10 days' time, and it's really, really lush green vegetation, simply because they've had the same amount of rain, but because it's a much lower altitude and it's much warmer, so much easier to germinate. So that's the update for today, day 4. We're about to go into some pretty remote territory for the next 3 or 4 days. So it may be difficult to get podcasts out, but if we can get a signal, we'll try and do that. And hopefully Anna and I will get a little bit better, so we're able to talk a little bit more clearly